Have you ever really stopped to think about what the word business actually means? I know, it sounds pretty simple, right? But the way we've studied it, the way we've defined it, well, that has gone through this incredible transformation over the years. We're going to trace that story, that evolution, and it all starts with a pretty interesting question.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Is running a brand new, fast-moving tech startup the same as managing a giant, complex hospital? I mean, sure, they both have budgets to worry about and people to manage, but the answer to that question, well, it unlocks a massive shift in how we think about business itself. So let's unpack it.
So first, let's head back in time. We're going to start with what you could call the original blueprint. This was the very first, kind of straightforward way of looking at the whole world of business.
You know, in the early days, if you said you were studying business, it pretty much meant one thing and one thing only: a traditional for-profit company. The entire field of study was laser-focused on these specific kinds of firms, and really only on what was happening inside their own walls.
So, what did they see when they looked inside? Well, the whole approach was kind of like a mechanic looking at a car engine. It was all about popping the hood and figuring out what all the individual parts were and what they did.
And what they found was that you could break down just about any business, let's take a local bakery for example, into 4 core jobs or functions. You've got human resources for hiring the best bakers, you have sales and marketing to get people lining up for those croissants, you need operations to actually do the baking, and of course you've got accounting and finance to manage all the money coming in and going out. It was a really clean, universal model.
This method got a name, the functional approach. Makes sense, right? You understand a company by looking at its different functions or departments. And believe me, for decades, this was the standard way of thinking. It was the blueprint for how a business worked.
But then, of course, the world started to get a lot more complicated. People began to realize that these brilliant ideas about management and organization, well, they didn't just apply to car factories and bakeries. The whole definition of business was about to get a whole lot bigger. And this shift led to a ton of new questions. How do you manage a nonprofit organization like a hospital, where profit isn't the main goal? What really makes a high-risk startup different from a super standardized franchise? And how in the world do you measure something as abstract as a company's brand? Suddenly, that old simple model, it just wasn't enough to answer these more complex questions. But here's the most important part of this whole story. This new, modern way of looking at things didn't just throw the old blueprint out the window. Nope, it's much better to think of it like a software upgrade. It added a powerful new layer of understanding right on top of that original system.
Which brings us to the big question, right? If the new view just builds on the old one, then what's the fundamental difference? How did this upgrade actually change the game?
Okay, so here's the side-by-side. The old functional approach was internal and very general. It asked a simple question like, how do we do accounting? But the modern view looks outward, and it's all about specifics. It asks a much more sophisticated question like, how is managing a hospital's finances totally different from managing a startup's finances? You see that shift? It's all about context.
So the crucial point is this. You still absolutely need to understand those basic functions. Accounting is still accounting after all. But the modern view adds this vital layer of context over it. It recognizes that how you perform those basic functions depends completely on the specific type of organization you're running.
So why does any of this really matter? Well, it marks the shift from thinking there's one universal rulebook to realizing that you need specialized strategies for every situation.
Let's go back to our bakery one last time. Now imagine a nonprofit soup kitchen opening up right next door. On paper, they have the same functions. They both have operations. They make food. They both have finance. They manage money. But their goals, their challenges, their entire reason for being are completely different. There's no way you can manage them the same way. The modern view teaches us that context isn't just important, it's everything.
So that leaves us with a final thought. We've seen how the what of business, those core functions, was layered with the where, the organizational context. And as things like AI and automation start handling more and more of that what for us, it really makes you wonder, will the next layer be all about the why, the purpose, the mission, and the impact behind the organization? Now that's something to think about.